From the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom, this is The Gateway. It's Wednesday, February 5th. I'm Abby Larico. Energy is largely produced in rural areas and shipped to urban locales. That creates challenges for smaller communities.
And consequently, we're kind of caught in the crossroads of that, with both the benefits and costs that come along with that.
The University of Missouri is launching an effort to answer questions about the impact of power generation on rural communities, what those questions are, and concerns being raised about who exactly is answering them, coming up after this news on The Gateway. Roughly 3 months after Missourians voted to put abortion rights in the state constitution, a House committee heard a proposal yesterday that would again ban most abortions. St. Louis Public Radio's Sarah Kellogg reports.
The House Joint Resolution, if passed by voters, would remove the provisions allowing abortion in the state constitution and instead only allow abortion in cases of rape, incest, medical emergencies, or fetal anomalies. Representative Melanie Stinnett of Springfield is the sponsor of the proposed amendment. She said in committee that she heard concerns from constituents about the language of Amendment 3 after its passage.
It is through this process that Missourians will have an opportunity to modify and clarify the abortion laws of Missouri.
Stinnett also disputed the argument that the resolution ignored the will of Missouri voters who passed Amendment 3 with 51.6% of the vote. In Jefferson City, I'm Sarah Kellogg, St. Louis Public Radio.
The St. Louis Board of Aldermen walked away from their latest meeting again without a plan to spend the nearly $300 million in RAM settlement money. Yesterday's meeting was a continuation of Friday's, which was abruptly recessed, and board members ultimately decided not to advance any legislation. Ward 1 Alderwoman Ann Schweitzer had proposed to allocate only $40 million to the city's water department and decide on the rest later.
I think people are sick of seeing inaction from their city government, and so it is what it is. We have to just take it and roll with it, and I think that I'm still going to be fighting for water, I'm still fighting for basic city services, I'm still fighting for infrastructure.
Two bills with different spending visions both included funding for water infrastructure. The board breaks for spring elections after this week, and debate on the RAM settlement money won't resume until the board returns in April. As the St. Louis Civil Service Commission continues to consider whether to fire the city's personnel director, they will allow arguments that Mayor Tashara Jones is pursuing the ouster for political reasons. St. Louis Public Radio's Chad Davis reports.
The hearing stems from an incident last July when Personnel Director Sonia Jenkins Gray took a city vehicle to Jefferson City with a subordinate to retrieve personal documents. She admitted to the incident and reimbursed the city the $170. But the crux of Jenkins Gray's argument is that Jones has targeted her for political reasons. Ronald Norwood is Jenkins Gray's lawyer.
But the evidence is the evidence, and we already got evidence in the record about political interference, about efforts to subvert civil service, cronyism, patronage, the very things that are antithetical to independence.
Lawyers for the city argued the incident had nothing to do with the question of political interference. I'm Chad Davis, St. Louis Public Radio.
Yesterday, the commission also rejected a motion to hear from several high-ranking city officials in the matter. Lawyers for Jenkins Gray had wanted Comptroller Darlene Green, City Councilor Sheena Hamilton, and Airport Director Rhonda Hamnabrigi to testify. Reggie Harris is the lawyer representing the city.
Burdening a city government or an organization by hailing its high-level executives into court to testify on these issues is unnecessary and improper.
Jenkins Gray's lawyers had also previously asked for Mayor Jones to be subpoenaed, but the commission denied and upheld that decision. Because the top two candidates in the St. Louis mayoral primary move on to the general election, 4 years ago, Kara Spencer had endorsed Tashara Jones as a second choice for her supporters. But as St. Louis Public Radio's Rachel Littman reports, the political landscape is drastically different in 2025.
Spencer, currently the 8th Ward alderwoman, says she and the mayor are ideologically aligned on many issues. But Spencer says Jones has not kept her promises on government transparency. She says too many people are dying at the city's jail, and she says the administration is not doing enough to help people who are homeless.
To see a stated set of values versus an enacted set of policies and procedures and service to the community has played out very differently.
Jones, Spencer, and 2 others are vying for a spot in the April general election. Voters can choose none, some, or all of them in the March primary. I'm Rachel Lippman, St. Louis Public Radio.
Spencer was a guest on the Politically Speaking podcast, where all 4 mayoral candidates will be appearing. The uncertainty of when the Trump administration will release federal grant funds has left immigrant and refugee agencies in the St. Louis region in a financial bind. Agency leaders say last week's pause in federal funding is a wake-up call. St. Louis Public Radio's Andrea Henderson reports.
When the Trump administration paused federal grants and loans last week, Jessica Bueller was horrified. Her organization, Welcome Neighbor St. Louis, could no longer provide social services for Afghan refugees. Bueller's also concerned about paying her staff because their salaries are combined with grant funding from the federal government, which owes the organization more than $310,000.
We paid everyone for January. Now we're starting into the month of February, and we have no idea when these funds are going to be released or if they're going to be released.
Bueller started a $100,000 fundraising campaign to help the organization stay afloat for the next 3 months. I'm Andrea Henderson, St. Louis Public Radio.
Drivers in Missouri will soon have another specialty license plate option, and this one features one of the state's important pollinators, honeybees. The Missouri State Beekeepers Association is rolling out the new license plate. It's the color of honey, a golden yellow, with a honeybee sitting on a hexagon to mimic part of a honeycomb. On the bottom, the words, "Bee Friendly." Clayton Lee is a historian and a past president of the State Beekeepers Association.
It's an easy, quick way to kind of see that somebody is supporting beekeeping and really pollinators in general.
He says the license plates will help fund research on bee health and support educational programs for beekeepers and the public. Once the Missouri Department of Revenue receives 200 orders for it, the plates will start to be produced. Lee says at last check, they were close to reaching that number. The University of Missouri is launching a new research center focused on energy in rural areas. It aims to provide information and context to the often controversial topics of renewable energy and transmission lines that cut through small communities. But Jana Rose Schleis reports some are concerned its funding may cloud its findings.
Missouri is at the center of energy production and the debates over how it's done. Electricity is often made in rural areas, and then much of it needs to be transported to urban areas.
And consequently, we're kind of caught in the crossroads of that, with both the benefits and costs that come along with that.
That's Michael Saikuda, an economist and soon-to-be director of the new Center for Rural Energy Security, a University of Missouri research initiative that will examine the economic and social impacts of energy infrastructure on rural places. Saikuda says there's not much information about how this infrastructure, power lines, wind turbines, solar panels, affects the communities in which it's generated.
There's been relatively little work systematically looking at these impacts.
The initial financial support for the research comes from the Missouri Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau President Garrett Hawkins says that makes sense.
We're not only producers of energy, but we are significant users of energy, and everything we touch is tied to energy.
In recent years, building large-scale solar, wind, or transmission projects in rural communities has been controversial. Hawkins and other farmers often question the effects of transitioning large numbers of acres of land from agriculture to energy production. The Missouri Farm Bureau is particularly concerned about what energy infrastructure means for property rights. It's lobbied to change Missouri's eminent domain laws, which allow governments to acquire private property. The Farm Bureau has also gone before the Missouri Public Service Commission to challenge the Grain Belt Express, a multi-state electrical transmission line that would carry wind power made in Kansas through Missouri and onto Illinois and Indiana. Hawkins says research on the impact of energy development in rural communities is all the more essential as the industry transitions from primarily fossil fuel sources to renewables.
Those of us in the heartland and private property owners or farmers and landowners all across the country are being asked to yet again to bear the brunt of housing infrastructure.
The Farm Bureau's involvement in the research initiative has raised red flags for some renewable energy proponents.
Everything about this suggests that it is designed to be something that's going to be critical of clean energy, and nothing about it is suggesting that it's going to be objective.
That's James Owen, director of Renew Missouri, a clean energy advocacy group. Owen says there are a variety of benefits for rural communities that host energy projects, such as increased local government revenue and additional income for landowners who lease property to developers. Benefits he says the Missouri Farm Bureau tends to overlook.
And to say that, nobody from rural Missouri is benefiting from clean energy, I think that is a grand bit of misinformation of itself.
Michael Saikuda, director of the forthcoming center, says the politics and conflicts around energy in rural communities concerns him.
I don't like controversy, and I don't like being in the middle of the arguments, and I don't intend to be. Our goal is to produce research based on sound scientific principles.
Saikuda says the Center for Rural Energy Security's work will be peer-reviewed and held to scientific standards.
Anytime you have sponsored research, you have the concern about biased research. I am committed to making sure that isn't the case.
He is currently assembling a team of researchers and anticipates studies to begin in the next few months. I'm Jana Rose Schleis.
That story comes to us from member station KBIA in Columbia. The Gateway is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, a listener-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis. Theme music by Ryan McNeely of Adult Fur. I'm Abby Larico, and from the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom, this has been The Gateway.